Hi everyone. Good evening. Hello. Good evening everyone. If I sound a little bit distracted, it's just because I'm trying to type in the topic so I can pin it. So just give me a moment while I do that, and then we can get started. Hey Des, 1 second please. I'm just trying to type in today's topic. Whew. How's everyone doing? Hello, hello, hello. I'm just trying to post the topic and then pin it so we all know what we are talking about. Okay, done. Hi, good evening everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Chrystalis Conversations, to today's episode of Chrystalis Conversations. Thank you to everyone who's joined, who's here today. Let me just say hi to my people. Hi Tinuade. Hi Des. Hi Fumi. Hi Adobe. Hi Akuna. Hey Joy. Hi Yewande. Hi Patrick Simsima. How are you? Dr. Toke in the house. Hi Lisa. Hi Bio. Right, so this is Chrystalis Conversations. We're here every Sunday. Well, since I'm saying that, let me quickly just put in there that I won't be here next Sunday because, you know, it is, I'll be preparing for my son's birthday. So I'm not here on Sunday because my favorite human, as I call him, my sunshine, my executive producer and technical director of Chrystalis Conversations, it's his birthday. So won't be here next Sunday, but we'll be back the week after. Hi Jenny. We'll be back the following week. But usually I'm here every Sunday at 7 p.m. West African time. This is Chrystalis Conversations. Chrystalis is a platform for women and a few good men who are on a journey to becoming our best selves. So we're not where we may not be where we want to be, but we certainly are not where we used to be. And the whole idea of Chrystalis is to celebrate the process, the power of becoming, to share our stories, share our experiences, because I firmly believe that the more we speak openly, the more we're able to be more vulnerable with each other, the more we can help each other, because usually we're in our little silos going through whatever it is we're going through and we think it's just us. But once we start opening up, you hear somebody else's story. First of all, that lets you know you're not alone, but you know, you just never know where you're going to get the help you're looking for, the encouragement you're looking for. So just trying to create that enabling environment through Chrystalis where we can have conversations that matter and conversations that will build us up. So we're going to start soon, but in the meantime, can you guys see my necklace? It says Chrystalis. This was a gift. Somebody gave this to me, one of my beloved aburos and a huge fan of Chrystalis. I met her through the Chrystalis platform actually. So Chrystalis is doing amazing things because I met her doing this job that I do, this and she's become a very dear sister of mine, and she gave me this. I love it. So anyway, Moji is in the house already. Thank you to everyone who joined on time. I don't want to, you know, I want us to get started right away. So let's, I'm adding Moji now. Hey girl.
Hey.
Hi Moji.
Yes,
How
can you
are
hear me?
Hi. So I have to say, just for everyone to know and understand, that Moji literally just joined Instagram today. But just because she wanted to have this conversation, because she wanted to share her story, she joined Instagram today. So she's an Instagram newbie. Can you guys just show her some love? Say hi to Moji Swartjes. This is my second guest. I had a guest a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Ayorinde, who also joined Instagram the day of the conversation, just because. So, this is how important people, this is how much this conversation means to you. I don't take it for granted, Moji, that you went to all this trouble to join Instagram just because you want to share your story. And when we were speaking beforehand in the pre-interview, you said, you hope you can enlighten somebody, you hope you can encourage somebody. So Moji's totally doing this because she was hoping that by sharing her story, she might be able to help someone else or another family. So again, like I said, give Moji some love. Moji, welcome to welcome to social media. Welcome to Instagram. Hopefully we don't scare you away after this.
Yes, I hope so.
Try to make it as painless as possible. All right, Moji, I'm just going to have you, I asked you to send me your bio. You didn't send it.
Yeah,
so
I forgot. Sorry.
That's fine. So you know what? Sometimes it's best to hear it from the horse's mouth. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes. So I'm Moji Swartjes. I have 3 children, an 18-year-old girl, 16-year-old boy, and 14-year-old boy. And we live in the Netherlands. We before that we lived in Scotland, and we came to Nigeria for 5 years with my husband's job, and we're now back here in his hometown. So and I studied engineering, but I'm now more or less a practicing home mom, I guess. Because I think you learn every day. So so that's me.
All right, thank you. That was a great introduction. So you have 3 children, a boy and 2 girls.
Yes.
And the youngest one is Matthew.
Yes.
And it's Matthew who's the reason why we're here today, actually. Yes. So I want to ask you, Matthew is how old now? He's 14, isn't he?
So Matthew is 14 now, yeah. So he just turned 14 actually on the 4th of July.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So I want to ask you, first of all, let's just go back to the very beginning. When Matthew was first born, placed into your arms, what were your first impressions? Obviously, that's a bit of a cliche question, but what were your first impressions? And as he grew up in his, early months to first couple of years, what do you remember about that time?
Well, so Matthew was born, I think it was on a Sunday evening, and he came out fine. There was nothing to indicate there was anything wrong. He had a very good birth weight. He was a very happy baby. He slept well. He ate well. He met all his initial milestones. He walked when he was supposed to walk, crawled when he was supposed to crawl. So everything looked like it was going well. There wasn't any reason to be concerned about his development or anything like that. And it was kind of maybe when he was about 19 months that I got a phone call from the nursery saying that there had been something had fallen on the ground and all the children had reacted except Matthew.
Okay. And
so they asked me to have his hearing checked. So that was the kind of like the very first initial signs that perhaps there might be something wrong. But at the time, we didn't. I just thought they were being overreactive. So, yeah.
Okay, so before I let you go further, I just wanted to stay on, this first. So before he was 19 months, before he was, and you said he met all his milestones. He was a happy baby. Did he smile a lot? Or what was his temperament?
Yeah, he smiled a lot. He was very active. He enjoyed just. I still remember he used to kind of like play a game with his dad, and they would sing together. He would not really do the singing, but he would react to the songs, do all the imitations, do all the hand movements. I used to go with him to the mother and toddler group, and he was very engaging with us. Yeah, and so he was just when I if I had to compare him to my other two children,
Which
he was
is what I was just going to ask you,
yeah,
that you had two others before him. At that
yes,
point, was he sort of right on track with the rest of them, the other two
was
that?
yeah, he was right on track with them, and he was also very much engaging with them and interacting
Mm,
with them.
mm,
So yeah, and he was he enjoyed our company. He responded to his name, and I have lots of photos of him in those first probably 12 months of his life where you could really see him engaging with the camera.
okay. So, and this I may be sort of jumping the gun a little bit, and we can maybe park the question later, but something that just came to my mind is, would you say, or do you believe that whatever it is, he wasn't born with this? It was something that happened? Or has that sort of come up in your conversations with the medical?
Yes, it has come up in conversations with the medical team that I have seen over the past years. And my belief is that he was born normal, that there wasn't anything, that there was probably an environmental factor that triggered. Perhaps he had that, perhaps maybe within him he had that um, likelihood that he might develop autism. But I think that perhaps sometimes an environmental factor can trigger something to happen. And that was kind of my belief. Now, the belief of the specialists was that it was already there, and that
Mm,
perhaps it just did not express itself until later, because apparently there's a kind of like brain pruning that happens around the age of 18 months old, and so at that point in time that's when things begin to express themselves. So it's yeah, it's something that has not been clear to everyone as to whether it was like that or whether it was something that triggered it. But
okay.
in my opinion, I felt like something triggered it, at least up until, a few years ago.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for answering that. Actually gave me new perspective that I didn't previously have. And at this time, 19 months when the nursery called, you were living in Scotland.
Yes.
Okay, so you were living in Scotland. So prior to the nursery calling, you said everything was fine. But looking back now, what would you say were some of your earliest indications that maybe something wasn't quite right?
Well, I think what happened, so after the nursery called, they asked me to get his hearing checked, but I didn't do it because I didn't think there was anything wrong with his hearing. And the reason why was because I could see that at home he was responding to noises around him. I could see that that
Mm,
was clearly happening. So I just thought that perhaps that was just an off day at the nursery.
mm,
Um, but besides that, I also began to notice that some of my friends who had babies around the same age, that the children had started babbling and making some sounds and some
mm,
words, and
mm,
Matthew really hadn't started doing that yet. So I just kind of assumed that, okay, well, maybe it's because he's the last born. The other two kids are doing his talking for him. He doesn't
mm.
really request for things. Everything's always been requested.
Everybody
It's always
has
been done for him.
his needs already, and
And
mhm,
so I then and then I also, at that point in time, my husband had just found this, started this new role in Nigeria. So he was in Nigeria, and he was flying back and forth between Nigeria and Scotland. And so I just thought that, home life was also a bit disruptive. So perhaps that was a bit, creating a bit of anxiety in Matthew. And and we were also in the middle of, doing this very big move from Scotland to Lagos at the time. So I just thought that there was so much going on that that's
mhm,
probably why Matthew was reacting the way he was, that's why probably a lot of developmental milestones were not being met,
mhm,
but they were not huge. They were
right,
just very, very subtle things that were not just that not necessarily kind of jump out. So up until that time, up until that move, I didn't really think there was anything wrong. I just really thought that he was just a late bloomer, and that
mm.
was it. Yeah.
Okay. Before I go further, I forgot to say this earlier on. Please, if you've got questions for Moji, please put them in the question box. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, bottom right hand, it should be, there's a question icon there. Click on it, put your questions there, and we'll try to take as many questions as we can towards the end after we've had the conversation. So, well, you can go ahead and make comments and all of that, so we know you're here with us.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So Moji, what year was this?
So this was in 2009. So this was so this move I'm talking about was a move that we were doing in July of 2009.
And nine. Okay,
Yes.
so then I guess presumably the whole family moved to Nigeria to join your husband. Then
Yes.
when did you first start to, because you said up until this time, you hadn't really been, yeah, the nursery had said something and you noticed that maybe he wasn't really vocalizing, but you're not really worried.
Yeah.
When did you really start to worry? And what were the symptoms, or what was it that made you really start to sit up and pay attention?
So so when we came to Lagos, we signed Matthew up for a nursery. It was a nursery somewhere in Victoria Island, and when he got there, this was, I think, he said in September of 2009, and so he was there, and everything was going well, but during that period, I think about October, November, I also began to feel that something was not quite right. Matthew was not responding to his name. When we called him, he would not turn around. He was just like the simple instructions that I know that at this point in time, my other children were responding to. He could not do. A lot of the games that we used to play with him, he wasn't engaging in them anymore. He wasn't playing the way that he used to play. But I just kind of, I just kind of internalized it, and I just thought, okay, let me just know. Maybe I'm focusing too much on this. And then the nursery then called and said, look, Matthew's been here 3 to 4 months now, and the kids that came in at the same time with him have already have been doing all these other things, and Matthew he doesn't seem to be developing in the way we would expect him to develop, having been here for 3 to 4 months. But also I see that we see that he's not playing with toys appropriately. And
Right.
so they asked me to come in for.
So sorry, what do they mean when they say he's not playing with toys appropriately?
So for example, if you have a box, like, I think a common kind of like children's toy would be like a box with different shapes on it, and you would have to take the shapes and put it inside the different in the right side, or at least you would attempt to. And what Matthew was doing was that Matthew would take the blocks and he would throw them. He would just was just throwing things. You would give him a doll and he would just bite it. You would, he just, he wouldn't take a toy and observe it and put it apart. He would just put it in his mouth, and almost like what a 6-month-old would do, or a 3-month-old, when they are trying to kind of understand textures and things like that. And so they asked me to come in to observe him and to see if maybe I could see what they were seeing. And I went there and I saw the other children and I saw Matthew, and I could see that it was night and day between Matthew and these other kids. And what I also saw is that Matthew did not want to sit down. He was very busy. He was constantly kind of moving around and going everywhere, and yeah, it was just clear that the way this child is developing is very different from the other children.
Right.
And so that's kind of when I started to express also what I had noticed at home to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, at this point, you're having to start thinking about, what's really going on here. you'd had, your own observations at home, and the nursery is now sort of said corroborated, or also, which means that, there's probably something happening here. So what did you then do? What was the progression from those initial concerns that you had, that the nursery had, to, exploring, getting the help of getting evaluated and maybe getting a clinical diagnosis?
So, so after the nursery mentioned this, the nursery suggested that we see somebody. I think they had worked with an institute in the past. I don't know how they knew of this institute, but it was an institute in the Netherlands. And that's Christmas, we were going back to, we were actually going skiing, but we were going to stop in the Netherlands for like a few days. And so we went ahead and we booked an appointment with the institute that they said we should go to. They had given us a suggestion because frankly, we didn't know where to go. And so we flew out there, and then the very next day we arrived. We took Matthew to the institute, and I still remember the drive there, and Matthew sitting in the back, and myself just praying that it's just a case of Matthew just blooming late and not and that there was nothing things that concerned me about Matthew's development that I had observed over time. And just, so I took those notes with me. And as we arrived at the institute, we kind of got in there, and they asked us to kind of wait outside while they observed Matthew separately. And then they had an interview with my husband separately and an interview with me separately. And so he was seen by a child psychologist and a child psychiatrist, both of them separately doing their own observations. And so, and after about maybe 2 hours, they called us back in, myself and my husband, and they said to us that, look, from what they had observed, from their observations, from the interviews with us, from the notes I had written, it was a very clear case of autism. And they said they could prolong the decision by sending us to a specialist institute that could do more detailed observations and more detailed evaluations of his condition, but that to them it was a very clear case, and they both arrived at that decision separately. So it wasn't that they discussed it.
Right.
She saw it, and the other lady saw it, and they both came together and they said, look, this is what I think it is. And so that's really how we found out that Matthew.
So that was December 2000.
That was December 2009.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before I wanted to ask you about your emotions, because it can't be, as a parent, to be confronted with that kind of news. I can only imagine just how devastating that must be. But before I ask you that, I wanted to find out from you what were your, I guess, going in, what were you kind of said you were thinking it's just going to be developmental, it's just going to be some delays, there's nothing wrong, you're probably going to hear that there's no problem, but you were told open and shut, this is autism. Now, what I ask you, and I know you're not a doctor, but I understand that there's, what they call autism spectrum disorders. So there's a whole spectrum of what it could be. Was there a specific, or is it just autism, or was there something a bit more specific about the diagnosis?
It was, because the thing is that you see in a lot of places, actually, it's very, at least back then, it was very rare to actually get a diagnosis for autism at that age. Matthew was actually an exception, because generally they don't generally make that kind of diagnosis until the child is about 3 or 4 years old. So this was being made when Matthew was 2.5 years old. And so was it a savant form of autism, which is basically high functioning? Was it a low functioning form of autism? It was very hard to say because
that time
a child is still developing, 2.5, 3, 4. They could not really say how severe the autism was, but they just knew that there was a developmental delay, and this developmental delay looked like it was related to autism. And so it wasn't a clear cut. No, they couldn't tell me how severe or what kind of autism it was,
okay.
or even if it was just quite young.
Is it just me or Moji?
Yes.
Okay, you were frozen for a moment.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Keep going.
Oh, right. Yes. And so they could not really tell me, where he was on that spectrum.
Okay.
That would come over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now we've gone back to that moment where you're told this is, they are pretty certain that without needing to any further evaluation, that they're pretty certain that this is autism.
Yes.
As a mother, as a parent, being confronted with that diagnosis, what were your emotions like? What were you feeling? What were you thinking? What was the drive? As you were leaving, taking your husband and your child, taking Matthew
as
away
we left, actually, even before we left, I had already lost it. I was in tears. I was devastated in their office. A friend of mine in the US who was a pediatrician at the time had sent me a very kind of because I had kind of, before we left to go to the Netherlands for this to see the specialist, I had Googled to try to see, okay, can I get some hints as to what this could be? And as I Googled and as I typed in some of the symptoms, I saw that, it was all kind of lining up to autism. So I called this friend and I said, look, I think Matthew might have autism. Do you have any information so that I can prepare myself for going for this meeting? And so she'd sent me all this information and all this data and things, and what the likely outcomes were. And so I already kind of knew what at least at that point in time, what the likely outcome could be for Matthew. And so his whole life flashed in front of me, and I was devastated. And I've often told people that I grieved my son. I mourned him. And when people hear that, they say, well, what do you mean by that? And I say, because you mourn what what the plans that you've made for this child. You realize that perhaps those plans are not going to materialize. Perhaps those milestones of going to nursery school, of going to primary school, of going to secondary school, everything just flashes in front of you. And it was devastation. There's no other way to describe it. And my husband literally had to pick me off the floor because I was just, we had to go back to his parents' house that day. And when he told his parents, I was just in floods of tears. And the following day we had to fly to France for skiing. And I was trying to hold it together because the other two kids were there, and trying to kind of help them to see, not to be so overwhelmed by this news. I mean, I think my daughter was 6 at the time, and my other son was 4. And so as we kind of arrived in France, I think for the first 2 or 3 days, my husband would try to get me to get out of bed because it was just a struggle. And looking at my son, it was like as if he was a different person, And so my husband kept trying to kind of, trying to comfort me and say, look, Moji, the Matthew that you had yesterday is still the Matthew today. It's just that now you have a name for what is wrong with him. So you need to kind of try to accept him and to, just embrace him as you knew him yesterday. And so, but this is easier said than done for a
Right.
mother. And so it's emotions that I still, it still gives me the tingles because I remember I exactly how I felt at that point in time. Yeah.
It's interesting you said, that you sort of went into mourning or a
Yeah.
grieving period. It's interesting, but it makes sense to me, even just sitting here listening to you, because when we have our children, when they're first born, even as mothers, especially when you're carrying the child around, before you even, birth the child, you already have so many, you're dreaming big dreams for this child, you have so many, and you've seen the whole life of the child
Yeah.
ahead of the child even getting here.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the child gets here and is placed into your arms, all you can think about is how this child is going to be. You're going to make sure that you're able to give this child everything so that he can become, this amazing person that you just know as a mother that he's destined to be. So
Yeah.
then being, having to face this news, it's like that whole chapter, we've got to throw it away and start
Yeah.
writing a new chapter. And I think it's it's natural to mourn that, and I think it actually ultimately maybe is even healthy to go through that grieving period so that you can start writing a new chapter. So following that to the next, now putting one foot in front of the other,
Yeah.
what next? What did they tell you as you were leaving? Sorry, as did they give you any,
They gave
that
me,
Netherlands? What did they say? This is what to
yeah,
do.
they didn't give me any prognosis. They just said to me, well, take your child home. I read out all this, the friend that had sent me all this information. There were different therapies that were available options. I mentioned these options to them as, is there something that we could do? Is there somewhere where we could get training? But at the time, this was 12 years ago, the treatment interventions here were still very much at its infancy. And so for them, it was just more like, okay, well, just take your child home and see what your child can do. And so I began to research. I began to, based on all that information that my friend had sent to me, there were several interventions there. And so I began to look at the one that had the most scientific basis behind it, and the one that had the most, that had been researched and that had shown to be the most likely to be successful in terms of outcome. And so that took a few weeks to do. And trying to do this at a time when one was still, yeah, in this very grieving process was very difficult. But I knew that from what I read in that paper, that it kept saying early intervention. So I thought, I just need to get out of this place I am in and try to see, the help I can get for Matthew. And so we settled on one intervention. It seemed to be the one that seemed to have the most scientific basis behind it. And that intervention was, it was called ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. And then we began to scout across the world. Where could we find somebody that could either train us, or where we could take Matthew to start to receive this therapy? And so at the time, a lot of the therapy was being done in the US. And we had just moved to Nigeria 6 months ago. And so the thought of uprooting everyone, my kids, and moving to the US, I didn't even know if it was possible, but I was prepared to do anything for Matthew. And I just thought that, look, this is not realistic, because they also had their own challenges with having made this big move and losing all their friends in Scotland and moving to Nigeria, and they were just starting to settle into their school. So I just didn't think that that was the right option. And so we then found somebody in Oslo who was able to provide us with the therapy. And so on middle of February, my husband and I took Matthew, and we flew out to Oslo to see the psychologist. And then he trained us. We sat down there with him for about a week, where he was doing the therapy with Matthew, and he was observing us doing the therapy with him. And he advised us that, look, what you should do is, for the first month, try to get Matthew to be compliant, because otherwise you will have difficulties in getting people to work with him. And the reason why he said that was because at the time, Matthew could not even sit at the table. These were all things that I had observed at the nursery, that he couldn't sit down, he couldn't sit still, he couldn't, he was always very busy. And so we had to kind of try to work on those behaviors first. And during that time when we were in Oslo, the psychologist also evaluated him. And when he evaluated him, it became apparent to me that, first of all, a lot of the milestones Matthew had met as a child, as a baby, and as a toddler, he had lost them. So just very basic things like imitation and just doing, his fine motor skills and his gross motor skills, all those things had more or less faded away. The games that he, even when you gave him an instruction to clap his hands, or you showed him how to clap his hands, he couldn't do any of that. And for me, that was it was like the second kind of hit again, because it really hit me that, my gosh, this child is really developmentally delayed, and the challenge is much bigger than I had anticipated. And so what the psychologist then did was that part of this ABA program is that you what you do is that you break down the developmental stages into very, very small, manageable bits. And you start to teach all those bits again. And it really made me realize that my two kids were a miracle, because when I saw what it takes to kind of actually meet all these milestones and the work that went into it, I realized that, wow, we often take this kind of like, you have a child and everything happens and they talk and they walk and they run.
But take it for granted.
Yes, take it for granted. It's a miracle. And so we had to start to do all that again with Matthew. And so we came back to Nigeria. I would work with Matthew during the day. My husband would do it in the evening when he got back from work. And at the time I wasn't working. I had planned to start working, but of course that all went out the window. And so as we kind of got more control with Matthew, we decided that we needed to bring in people to help us to do the actual training and the actual therapy with Matthew. And this is where my sister stepped in, and my sister just basically just took the mantle and went. And I remember her saying, okay, she just drove everything. She said, okay, we'll go to University of Lagos, to the psychology department. She had eyeballed students there that she thought would be able to work with Matthew. She had interviewed them.
Is your sister a medical professional, or she just took this on?
My sister is a dentist, but my sister is somebody that just never, it's just everything, there's nothing impossible. And so...
and everybody needs someone like that in their corner.
Yes. And so she just kind of went for it. And so she got all these people in. And so we began to train them. And then they started working with Matthew every day. I mean, they would come in, they were extremely dedicated. They would come in at 8 in the morning, and they would work with Matthew till 5. And so we had lots of different programs. We had play program, we had occupational therapy program, we had just everything. We just put it into his day, with the hope that if we just bombard him and we do put in all these efforts, that we would kind of be able to kind of get him out of this situation. Because I saw it as, the way I saw the battle was, is that I have a newborn baby. I need to nurture this baby. And so that's kind of what I did, and that's what I tried to do.
Wow, that's deep. That's such a lot you've already kind of said. making the leap mentally, emotionally from being completely devastated to going into action mode, saying, you know, as a mother, well, I've got to find help for my child. I've got to advocate for this child. I've got to do, you know, get him the help that he needs. So going into that sort of action mode, to obviously having your sister with you, and I'm sure your husband, everybody else, you know, along this journey to say, okay, what's it going to, whatever it takes, we're ready to do it. But this must have taken a toll on you and the rest of the family. And I wanted to pivot a little bit from just talking about, or just park it for a moment, because I'm going to come back to it, talking about Matthew and you know, his diagnosis, his interventions that he started receiving. And let's talk about you a little bit, and the family. So your husband, the other children, there are two other children in the picture here.
Yeah.
And I know that, you know, caring for a special needs child tends to consume everything. You know, it takes up all the energy in the home. It's all about everything in the home. It starts to revolve around that, to almost to the exclusion of everything else. But I wanted to ask you, how did you take care of your own mental and emotional well-being? How did you stay, you know, positive or keep your energy up? How did you take care of your mental health?
I think, when we moved to Nigeria, I actually fought the move. You know, my husband was the one that was very insistent that we were going to make this move to Nigeria. And at the time, I was very happy with life in Scotland. You know, my kids were happy, and so he said, "No, we're going because I think it's important for the kids to really know and, you know, see this side of their culture and of who they are, and that it would make them more grounded." And so the first thing was that it was a blessing that I was in Nigeria, and because I come from a very close-knit family, and I think that really it was my family that carried me through those very early days. I remember that, my sister was obviously always there. My brothers would come every weekend. They would come and hang out. My parents would come. My parents would cook and they did that for the 4 years I was in Nigeria, 5 years. They would come every Saturday to sit with me and just talk. And but also we lived in an area where I knew that the children would get attention from other parents. I couldn't give that attention. Because I was just giving everything to Matthew. And so what I also tried to do is that I knew that I had to also watch for my own self also, because it's so easy to really kind of throw yourself into this and lose yourself. And so I relied a lot on my faith, that really, really kept me going. There was a verse that I came across that was really my anchor during this time. And I have it here. And it says, because at the time I was asking God, and I think it's a question that we all ask when we find ourselves in situations that we don't want to be in. Why me? Why me? And so I saw this verse, and the verse was that I did not reject you, but chose you. Do not be afraid. I am with you. I am your God. Let nothing terrify you. I will make you strong and help you. I will protect you and save you.
What scripture is that?
It's Isaiah 41, verse 10.
Verse 10.
Yes.
So that was your anchor, and I suppose still is.
Yes, it still is. And that's what kind of carried, that's what I carried with me. And also just also I exercised a lot. That was for me was a let out. I was always in the gym. and and those things, and also my support network. You know, I kept my support network very tight, and so it was my I had a fantastic nanny, and so she was also there at home with me, and you know, we co-parented Matthew together, and so that really helped me to know that there was somebody else there who was also helping me with raising this child that I didn't know how to raise. And so those were the things that really kind of kept me going, you know. Of course, I had my down days. I had days where it was just very hard to kind of pull myself up, and those days will be there. I don't want to deny that those days will not be there, but I think it's important to realize that, you know, you will have those days, and but that you need to have someone who can pick you up. And also just my husband, you know, just him kind of constantly just talking to me and just, you know, pulling me through. And really that's really kind of what got me through emotionally and my well-being. And I was also able to have time to get away because I had this very good support network at home. I could every 2 months or so I was away. I would take like maybe a week away, and I would just, you know, go and be by myself. And that for me those were the things that really, really helped me. And there are still things I still try to do today. I still try to practice today.
Thank you for sharing that, Moji. When you were speaking, first of all, when you started talking about how you didn't want to come back to Nigeria, you didn't want to, but you know, it turned out to be, you know, exactly what you needed. And the scripture that came to my mind at that time was, "All things work together for good, for those who love God and are called according to His purpose." It just made me once again think about how God is in the future, so far ahead of us, and He's working all these things out, and we don't even know. He's creating solutions ahead of the problems for us, and I think that we can all draw comfort from that, because sometimes life throws us curveballs. We just don't know what's coming around the corner, but we know who's already there. So no matter what it is, we can be sure that, you know, we'll get through it. And then you mentioned your husband as well. And I wanted to ask you, what was, you know, if any, what was the impact of having a special needs child in the house? How did that impact on your relationship with your husband? How did your husband, I mean, I know he was strong for you, but did he have that? And I know I'm not interviewing him here, but did he have, you know, how did he take it? And how did this impact on your relationship with each other?
I think my husband also went through his own struggles with with the diagnosis, but I think you know, not as much as I did. I think my husband is he's always very positive and very optimistic, and you know, the way he saw it was that, okay, we're just going to do this and it's all going to end up well, you know. And of course, it didn't quite turn out that way. It turned out that it was going to be a lot of work and it was going to be a lot of effort. But I think that there was always this understanding. We never really had the conversation, but there was always this understanding that we had to do this together, and that I couldn't bear the burden on my own. And so because I think that, you know, we kind of looked at it, you know, from a very kind of like helicopter approach, where I thought, okay, well, I can work now, so I will focus on Matthew, and you have to be the main breadwinner. And so we just kind of, you know, found a way to kind of make our relationship work around the situation that we found ourselves in. There was never any point in time where we felt like, yeah, okay, this is going to be, you know, it's causing too much stress or whatever. Of course, there were, I think that you have stresses on marriages in any case when you have children, because there's always, you know, there's a sleepless night. There's always something. And so there were the typical daily stresses. But I think with Matthew, it was just a very much an agreement that we were going to do this together, and that we're going to carry each other's burdens. And so, I mean, there would be times where I would I would be down and he would be the one that would carry me. And there would be the times where he would be down and I would be the one to make him see, you know, the positives that Matthew had achieved, you know. And so it was, you know, I don't know, I think God just made it work that way, you know, that we had this, you know, we're able to kind of work together as we did.
You know, that's another blessing in itself that
yeah,
shouldn't be taken for granted. You know, when
yes,
you're for all the silver linings, the reason, you know, they say there's always something to be grateful for.
yeah,
You know, that having a spouse where both of you are united in your focus,
mm,
and as you know, supporting each other is it's a blessing that one cannot begin to put a price on. And again, when you were speaking, another scripture that came to my mind was it's from the Ecclesiastes. It says, "Two are better than one,
yeah,
for they shall have a good reward for their labor. If one falls, the other can pick him up. If one is cold, they can keep each other warm." So I think, you know, what you've said has just sort of exemplified that, or brought life to that scripture. I'm grateful that you had that you had the support system, the wider support system, and of course the immediate support system of having you and your husband together, doing this together. But now I want to ask about your other children, who were still small, and sometimes, you know, at that age can't be expected to fully understand that, oh, Matthew is the one who needs all the attention now.
yeah,
You know, you guys are just going to have to be okay.
yeah,
I've heard of situations like that where the other children get resentful or begin to act out in certain ways, or even start to regress depending on their age, because, you know, I've heard stories like that. But how were your other children impacted by this situation, and what did you do to ensure? I know it must have been hard enough for you, but what did you and your husband do to make sure that the other children also felt that they were as important, and
yeah.
that Matthew wasn't the most important?
I think, you know, one of the things that was a blessing is that, you see, when we moved to Nigeria, the children were just starting in primary school. And so first of all, they had school to go to. So that took off maybe 6 or 7 hours of the day. And then when they came home, they had this, yeah, we lived in this compound where they had other friends, and for them it was, I always used to call it kinder paradise for them. So so they had that. But from the home front, I think that because we were in Nigeria and my parents were there, my brothers, my sister, everybody was, you know, coming and seeing, and, you know, they would, you know, get attention from the wider family, and sometimes not necessarily from us. And but it's funny because later on I remember speaking to my daughter. This is like 10 years later. And so she said to me that, look, you know, when we were younger and we were in Lagos, I used to feel that Noah and I used to say to each other that, you know, you loved Matthew more than us. And that it's only over time that they began to realize that, okay, Matthew does need a bit more attention. But it's not, but at the same time, they also needed attention. And I did debate actually having them, you know, having a child psychologist to speak to them, because I wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything that they were internalizing.
Right.
And so what I started to do is that, because I was a bit also conscious of this, after we had been busy with Matthew for a year and we had a nice setup for him at home, I would take them maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I would take them for a week, where I would completely leave the home environment. I would leave Nigeria and I would take them away, and I would spend time just with the two of them.
Mm.
And that was something that I started to do, and I still try to do to today. Of course, COVID has made that difficult, but I still try to do today. And also I encourage them to speak their mind.
Mm.
So and I said to them, look, even if you say that, you don't like Matthew, because it's okay. I want to hear it so that I can help you understand, why
Mm.
you're feeling the way you're feeling.
Mm.
So I try to encourage these very deep conversations with them, which sometimes they would be open to and sometimes they would not be. But I gave them that platform to know that, look, it's not wrong for you to resent Matthew,
Mm.
because there will be resentment there.
Mm.
And I understand, because he's taken a part of your life, but you can be honest about it and you can share it with me, and I can try to help you to kind of get through it, or I can get somebody in who can at least speak to you about it. And I think one of the blessings was that my children had each other, and
Right.
so they could talk to each other, particularly as they got older.
Yeah.
They could talk to each other, and there are some things that they share with each other that I don't know.
Mm.
But what I am grateful for is that they have each other, and I know that they can carry each other. And I've always tried to treat this battle with Matthew, I call it a battle, as a family battle. So everywhere we went together, because I wanted them to understand Matthew's life, and
Mm.
not to not to give them a sense of guilt, but to give them a sense of what family is about.
Perspective.
Yes. And that, we carry each other, we do things
Mm.
together, we help each other. And I think by seeing that has also helped their own relationship also, that that they support and carry each other.
That's amazing. And the wisdom, foresight, or discernment that you had, to just know to do certain things with them, I think is amazing. I want to kind of go back to Matthew now,
Yeah.
but before I do that, I wanted to ask you, because Matthew, at that point, wasn't verbal at all, was he?
No, no.
So what ways did you, apart from keep, caring for your other children and
Yeah.
making sure that they felt included, in what ways did you sort of foster their bond with their brother? Did they ever do any therapies with him? Did they do any, or how did they develop their own independent bond as
So
siblings?
yeah, so what I did was is that when they were everyone, even my dad, I encourage everyone to learn about the therapy. And so I encourage the children also to learn about the therapy, because in order for the therapy to be successful, everybody in the house has to be,
Involved.
yes, involved, and they have to intervene in the same way, so that Matthew's not confused, so that it's
Right.
not somebody does this. And so I really encourage them from the beginning to learn about the therapy. I encourage them also to sit in on the therapy so that they could see what the therapists were doing with Matthew, and to ask questions and to see what they could do. And so if even if it was just that little bit of teaching Matthew to clap his hands or helping him to ride a bike, just whatever small. And I said to them, just find something small that you can do, because if you're able to do that, then you also feel a sense of achievements that you've helped your brother. And I still see it today when they do something with Matthew and Matthew responds in the
Mm-hmm.
way that they were hoping for him to do, and he learns what it is they're teaching them. They have this sense of achievement, this sense of pride that they have contributed to their brother's development. And so he cannot necessarily maybe speak to them and engage with them, but the little that he can do gives them so much joy, and I don't think I said this earlier, but Matthew, one of the things that Matthew, when he was younger, was is that he never it was like he did not recognize us as his parents. He would look through us. He would just, it was, I don't know, for a painful, for a parent, there's nothing more painful than a child that you love just not even acknowledge you. And this was something that was so present when Matthew was younger, that we would leave the room, we would come into the room, there would be no reaction from Matthew. And so to now see ourselves now that he's 14, that he responds to us, he responds to his siblings. I call him my husband's shadow, because every time my husband leaves the room, he's walking around trying to figure out where his dad is. These were things that we didn't have in the beginning. And so for my children to really have this feeling that their brother recognizes them and, acknowledges them when they're there and when they're not there. Yeah, I think for them, I think that's something big for them.
Yeah, you actually just sort of preempted my next question.
Yeah.
No, I said I wanted to sort of come back to Matthew a little bit. I wanted to ask you, I know he's 14 now. What is the progress that you already started talking about it, so I'll let you continue talking about where he's at now. So just for those who may have joined the conversation a bit late, this journey started when Matthew was about 2.5 years old, and at the time he wasn't engaging at all, so he wasn't recognizing you or his siblings or anybody else. He wasn't social. He wasn't playing with toys the way you would expect him to. He was throwing things a lot. If I'm just trying to sort of summarize that. He was throwing things a lot. He couldn't sit still. You could hardly get him to sit still. So that's where you started from. And you didn't say this here, but I'll say it. I'll bring it up now because we talked about it in our pre-conversation, that he wasn't sleeping. He was barely getting at all through the night. Yeah. And so every hour or so he would wake up, which meant you would wake up, to care for him or your husband. So, that's the extreme end where we started from. Now that he's 2.5 at the time, he's 14 now. Yeah. Where is Matthew at? What progress have you seen? And, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes, yeah. So I think, first of all, what I would say is that I guess also particularly for anyone on the platform who has any concerns about their child's development, that early intervention is so important, it's so crucial. And I think that that's something that we are very thankful for, that we intervened early in Matthew's developmental challenges. Now, developmental challenge is kind of like, it covers a whole variety of areas in a child's life. It could be on communication, it could be on their motoric function, it could be on cognitive function. So there's lots of aspects to a child's developmental milestones in their, in their life. And for Matthew, of course, one of the things that is very big in Matthew's developmental milestones, and I think for any child, is their ability to communicate. And for Matthew, we worked intensively at this, and his communication skills are still very, very low. They're probably at that of an 18-month to 2-year-old. On the other side, you have his motoric skills that are a lot more advanced. Matthew does quite a lot of things. He's very good at, he can ride a bike. We just got back from holiday where we were doing a lot of walking in the mountains and things, and he's horse riding. And these are things that really require a lot of good balance and coordination. And these are things that we worked on very much early on in Matthew's developmental, when Matthew was younger. And so you can see how that has helped him today. In terms of also just even simple things like potty training, this took years to kind of really help Matthew to get to the point where he could go to the bathroom himself, do his number ones and do his number twos. And so I think what I would say is that for not to give up, it's just to be persistent, because some of these things can take 3-4 years for you to see the results. And we're still working on things now. We're still working on Matthew's communication skills. We haven't given up on it. We're still working on it. We're still working on improving, getting him to particularly his cognitive skills, his ability to understand, improving that. And every day you see breakthroughs. You see new you see new milestones being met, and they're very small, but all those little milestones add up to a big milestone. And so Matthew today, he's classified as nonverbal because he has a few words, but they're very much words that you have to drag out of him. So it's not that he's spontaneous. He's not a spontaneous speaker. So he's classified as nonverbal. And but if I look back and if I say that if we did not do the things we did, would Matthew be where he is today? Absolutely not. But we keep going, and we're not going to give up. And I always say to my husband that God hasn't given up on me, so I'm not going to give up on Matthew.
And guess God hasn't given up on Matthew either.
He hasn't given up on Matthew either. So we're just gonna keep going, and so that's so that's kind of where Matthew is today. And I think that as the psychologist said, I think the psychologist was very, very honest with me. He did say to me at the time that, I cannot tell you where your son will be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. And I think that was very great for me to realize, because there's no point in somebody trying to give you false hopes. I thought it was good for him to be honest with me, and I appreciate that honesty, because that honesty also allowed me to manage some of my expectations, and not feel completely overwhelmed by, if he did not reach this milestone, then it was a disaster, because that's what the psychologist said. So with autism, you just don't know. You just don't know where it will lead to or where it will end up. But the most important thing is to get the specialist support and to keep at it.
If I'm to sort of summarize what you've said, I think it is the small wins, celebrating the small wins that lead to the big wins. When you take them together, all those small wins, celebrating them, and also just looking at, I think something that's also clear is how you sort of constantly adapting what your success metrics are. So how so where for some people it could be a case of, well, he's not speaking, so therefore everything I've done over the last 12, 14 years, this child has been a waste. Look at it, after all this time, he's still not speaking. That's if you want to fixate on that as a success metric. But if you want to expand that and look at the other things that he's doing well, or that other things where maybe nobody expected him to be doing that well, but he's doing great in his motor skills, his his coordination, his balance. And I think it's something that, whether you have a special needs child or not, it's something that all of us as parents need to need this sort of reminder to just sort of celebrate the child for who they are.
Yes.
You have for who that child is and what that child is able to do right here and now, as opposed to fixating on the things that you feel, are not present.
Yeah. No,
So
I think
thank you again.
Yeah.
I have so many more questions for you, and I'm looking at the time, and I'm like, I told Moji I wouldn't keep her long. An hour and a half at the most, and I still have all these questions, and I can see plenty of questions in my Q&A box. I'm going to try to rush or speed up things a little bit, even though I feel like I talk to you for another 2 hours and we wouldn't run out of things. to talk about. Yeah, this conversation will be available off live. So after this, I'll save it, and I'll share the link with Moji, and it will be saved on my page. If you're not following me, please follow me. Please hit the follow button and follow me. It'll be saved on my Instagram page, but we're also going to save it on our YouTube channel as well. So we'll share all the links, within the next day or two, so you can circulate this to people who are not here watching live, or if you're here watching live, if you missed the early part, you can go back and watch again. Moji, I wanted to ask you now, because you said it was great to be in Nigeria, to have that amazing support system, but also we as Nigerians, we all know that this is a society where we are kind of told to just keep things in. These kinds of things are happening. We don't talk about them openly. We don't, everybody says just, we don't speak about things like that. So what is this, especially when it comes to our children, with there's a sort of like code of silence around these sorts of things. So what is it that made you decide to share your experience, to come out on a public forum like this and speak about your experience?
Yes, well, first of all, it was, I saw the conversation you did with Tiwa and her mom, and I just really enjoyed their honesty and how, they shared their own experience. And I felt like, okay, my story will be safe with Kemi. And, and so I just realized that when I was also in Nigeria, there was always a very kind of hidden, we don't talk about these things. And I think it's so important that we can carry each other through if we talk about it, if we're much more open about it, because you might be doing something that may help my child, and I may be doing something that may help your own child.
Absolutely.
And we hide things too much. And so I just really felt that it was so important that, if I can help just one person by telling my story, or if a family can understand what their child is going through, or what what a friend is going through, then it's all been worth it. And also because I just really believe strongly that a special needs journey doesn't have to mean devastation. It can also bring hope in a different way. It can take you on a journey in a different way than you had anticipated, and that journey could be very beautiful if you allow it to happen. And so I think that's really why I wanted to share my story, and to just acknowledge everyone that has been on this journey with me, because it's not, when you have a special needs child, it's not just about you. It's really that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. You really need the support of everyone in helping to raise that child. It's not just about one person. It's about the whole community, and it's about the community understanding the needs of that child, and also being able to be empathetic to that child also. Very often we're not. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's so, again, when we talk about it takes a village, you can't have the village come out and support you if you don't speak. Yeah. If you don't speak out and say, this is what I'm going through. And if we don't somehow normalize, differences and, everybody's unique journey, if we don't normalize talking about these things, then we'll all be in our, like I said at the beginning, our little silos, and, we won't get that help, that encouragement we need. Tiwa and her mom are here watching this live. And I just wanted to say, if they hadn't shared their story, we probably wouldn't be here sitting down talking to Moji. And as Moji is sharing her story now, I'm so confident that not only is she helping somebody, not only is she encouraging somebody, but maybe it'll get somebody else to speak there. As people start to share. My friend Faye is on, and she's got a special needs daughter as well. And when she started speaking about her own experience many years ago, there were a lot of people who were horrified. Why are you talking about this? Hopefully we can change things a little bit and, you know, bring these things more into open so that, like you said, we can all get help. We can be more empathetic towards each other. I just have a couple more questions. What advice would you give to any parent who has of a special needs child, especially for those who maybe have just recently received a diagnosis?
Seek help. Seek help as soon as possible. Don't sweep it under the carpet because it's not going to disappear. It's there, and so reach out, be open. The reason why I actually decided to stay in Nigeria is because of another friend of mine who opened up about her own her own challenges with her special needs children. And it was because of her that I had the courage to stay in Nigeria, because I could see that she was raising her boys in Nigeria despite all the challenges. And so just, you know, reach out to anyone you can reach out to in your community. I have one of the persons that was actually very instrumental in helping me to set up my home program, because I really had a home program for Matthew, was a lady, Tokes Bakare. She was based in the UK, but eventually moved to Nigeria. I don't think she's in Nigeria anymore, but she has a website where she offers help, particularly to children with autism. I don't know, you know, how that's going now because of the pandemic, and it's called Ask Tokes. But I think the most important thing is to try to
asktokes.com?
Yes, asktokes.com. Yes.
I'm just putting it on here so people can check it out.
I think it's one word.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Asktokes.com. Keep talking, Moji. I'm just
and I think that it's so important to get as much to also, as a parent, to be well informed. Educate yourself. Educate yourself, because you're going to be your child's advocate. You're going to be the one fighting for your child. And so you need to be clued on, and you need to be clued up about what is out there, what kind of interventions are out there, what you can do. I have done lots of different things. You know, I've been quite open. Some things I've just been like, no, that's not for me. But I've also worked on my son's diet. So I have tried to give him as much of an organic diet as possible to also help some of the hyperactivity. And, you know, so just try to educate yourself as much as possible on what is out there. Is that's the advice I would give.
Thank you. Thank you, Moji. I hear Ask Totes is here, watching the live. That's what I hear. So thank you very much, Tokes, for being here. I'll just summarize. I just like to do that because I feel like when we, you know, say things over and over again, that's when it sticks. So what you said in terms of advice to parents who may be walking this same journey is to seek help.
Yeah.
You know, seek help early, seek help often. It's to educate yourself, stay clued on, you know, do all the research, as much research as you can, you know, surround yourself with a community of supportive people, and I think get all the help that you can get so that you can effectively advocate for your child. And the last question I'm going to ask you, well, last but one, but I'll save my last question for after I've taken questions from the audience. I have so many questions here, is knowing what you know now, what would you do differently if you had this to do all over again? You know, assuming Matthew is still Matthew and you're starting this journey with him again, what would you do differently? What have you learned along the way? What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way? And what, if anything, would you do differently?
I think, you know, when I look back, you know, I honestly say that I did the best I could for Matthew. You know, I sought all the help I could find for him. I don't think anyone could come to me and tell me that, Moji, did you try that? Or did you speak to that person? You know, I went to all the conferences, I attended all the conferences, I spoke to specialists. I think one of the things that I would probably do differently was, you see, when we moved from Nigeria to the Netherlands, I underestimated what that move would do to Matthew. I did not realize that a change in environment like that would be very detrimental to him, to all the skills he had learned. I think that I could have been better prepared for that, but it was not something I could really foresee.
See.
Um, but I think that if I have to look back, that's probably one of the things that I would probably have done differently. But in terms of, his treatment options and how his development has gone, I would honestly say that, every decision I took, it was well informed, and and I um and I prayed before every step. So it was whatever my spirit was telling me to do, that's kind of what I did. And so there isn't really one thing that I would say that I regret not doing. I mean, I fought like mad for him, and I'm still fighting for him.
Still fighting for him.
Yeah.
Well, I've looked at the questions, and somehow, I guess we seem to have answered quite a few of the questions along the way.
Yeah.
So, but I'll post this comment just because I think this is from Abafe Kemi Luther. As a mother of a daughter with autism, global development delay, I salute, and ADHD, I salute you, Moji, truly. It's cut off, but what it says is, I'm truly sending you a lot of love.
Thank you.
And then what is the name of the institute? Is that in Norway? Are you able to share?
Well, I actually don't have the name of the institute, the exact institute, because it was a professor I saw in Norway. But the professor, what I would say is that the professor worked with Tokes Bakary. So it was basically, he referred me to the organization that Tokes was working with in the UK. And so that's how I was able to get Tokes to come to Nigeria to set up our program in Nigeria. So I would say that if you wanted more information about it, then perhaps if you make a connection with asktokes.com, she would be able to at least refer you to the organization in the UK if they're still if I don't know if they're still there or not, but that's kind of how I got to Tokes, was through him. They had set up a satellite program in the UK, and she was a part of that organization.
All right, thank you. So asktokes.com. For those who have questions, please reach out to Tokes. Tokes is on here. I think she's on here on Instagram as at asktokes as well. So you can follow her and reach out to her. Noah, your son, has asked what I think is a fantastic question. And it's actually, I don't know, Noah is in my mind because I said I had one or two more questions I was going to ask you, but I just wanted to take all the questions from the audience first. And he has preempted one of those questions, which is that, what has Matthew taught you on this journey? What has being the parent of a special needs child taught you? What has been the parent of Matthew taught you? What have you learned?
I have learned to love. It's we say we love, but I have learned to love in a way that is very different. It's a deeper kind of love that I cannot quantify, because when you have this child, you see everything that's going on, and you have to try to find a way to get beyond that and to see the child behind that. And And so Matthew has taught me to love in a way that allows me to accept everything about a person, as opposed to focusing on the wrongs of that person. I think that's the biggest thing that Matthew has taught me. Yeah.
And I think, it's sort of, we didn't talk about this before, and great question again, Noah. But, when I was thinking about, after our conversation, our pre-conversation, and I was thinking about the topic, what came to my mind was love always wins.
Yeah.
And that's what the topic for today is, love always wins, because I just felt the strength of the love that you have for Noah. For Matthew, sorry. Well, for Matthew, for your entire family, for your husband and your other children, and how the love that I could feel just talking to you, the love in your home, how I felt like that would carry Matthew, that would carry, against all the odds. It's the strength of that love that has brought you all as a family this far. Yeah. And it's the strength of that love that will take you all the way, as we said, that God's not done. God hasn't given up yet. And I think it sort of mirrors what you said, mirrors the love that God has for us, a love that never gives up, a love that wins out in the end. So I'm going to go into my last question and then close it out, which I think this kind of segues perfectly into that final question and the great way to wrap it all up. What are your hopes and prayers for Matthew regarding his future? What are your hopes and prayers for him?
Well, I think my hope for Matthew is that what I realize in this whole journey is that what's most important is that if you have a life full of joy and you're happy. And I think that for me, that's like really number one for me is that Matthew is happy in his life. And if he can lead an independent life, then that would be great. But I don't know tomorrow, and I live for today. And today is that I just want Matthew to be happy, to know that he's loved, and to keep finding joy in the little things that give him joy. He's a child that is always, he's content. And I learn from him. He teaches me every day, because when I see his contentment with the little things life gives him, I realize that I need to maybe find a bit more contentment in my own life. And so, if he has a happy, joyful life, then that's a blessing, and that's kind of what I pray for Matthew every day, is that God gives him and surrounds him with people who will love him and who will see what the beauty that God has created in this child. And if they can see that, then I know that Matthew will be fine.
Thank you so much, Moji. Love believes all things, hopes all things, bears all things. Love never fails. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story, your experience. Thank you for encouraging all of us. Thank you for teaching us, and sending my love to Matthew, to the rest of the family as well. The hopes and the prayers that you have for him are the hopes and prayers that I guess every parent has for their child, for their children. And we just pray that, God will continue to show himself strong. Thank you so much, Moji. Thank you for your strength. Thank you for being open. Thank you for sharing. God bless you. Thanks to everyone for joining Crystal's Conversations.
Sorry, Kevin, I wanted to say thank you to Simi for making this happen.
Thank you, Simi, for connecting us.
Thank you for connecting us. And and thank you for everybody for joining. And thank you, Kemi, for coming into my life and letting me tell my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for coming to Crystal's. I don't take it for granted when people agree to come here and share. I don't take it for granted. It's such a huge, it's I don't know. In fact, I've run out of words, and I never run out of words. So Thank you. I don't take it for granted at all. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
This has been a conversation. Please follow Ask Tokes. She's on Instagram. And if you're not following me, please do follow me. I'll be here not next Sunday, because like I said, it's my son's birthday, getting ready for his birthday next Sunday. So I won't be here, but we'll be here the Sunday after that at 7 p.m. with what I hope will be another enlightening and illuminating conversation. Thanks everyone, and have a great week.
Thank you.
God bless you all. Bye.
Remy, thank you. Bye.